gentlemen, please be upstanding for the worship call for the Mayor.
Thank you. I've got a really good assistant here. My chaplain will now say prayers, and my chaplain is the Reverend Arthur Botham from Popley.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute delight to be here and to be have the privilege of serving as Mayor's chaplain over the coming year. And I hope to serve both the Mayor and this chamber as best I can. I just wanted to begin by a little quotation from Winston Churchill. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And I thought that was quite appropriate as you're all servants of the people here. Winston Churchill also said when he was asked about the church that he preferred to be known as a buttress rather than a pillar. He would support it from the outside. So I wanted to read some words, if I may, from one of St. Paul's letters, who wrote about the body and its parts. And he wrote, "The body is a unit, though it is made up of many parts, and though all its parts are many, they form one body. Now the body is not made of one part, but of many. And if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be." It's a real statement of unity of purpose and of being. So may we bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for calling together this chamber and for their willingness to serve, to give of their time, their energy and themselves in the service of the people of this borough. We pray that you would bless them with great wisdom and understanding, unity of purpose, and the ability to listen and to speak with care, so that the decisions they make would honour your name and further the common good of all the communities and this borough that they are elected to serve. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Right, please be seated. Right, we'll get the housekeeping bit out of the way. We're not expecting any fires tonight, so if the alarm does go, would you please evacuate the building? The fire exits, there are several fire exits. I know mostly we say go to there, but it really does depend. I would say get out safely. And we all then meet in the War Memorial Park. The meetings are webcast, so please note that if this meeting's been webcast live, it will be on the internet and you'll all be on there. And your mobile phones, could you please make sure they're either switched off or silent? Thank you very much. The other part of the housekeeping, if we do use electronic voting, and you actually require a recorded named vote, you must request a recorded vote for it to be actually recorded in the minutes. And also, please ensure your voting cards are fully inserted. Okay, next we go on to item 1, which is apologies for absence. Councillor Mrs. Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Rob Musson, Councillor Clive Pinder and Councillor Roger Gardner.
Right, Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I should apologise for Councillor Ron Hussey for lots of reasons, but principally because he's not here tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors Andrew McCormick and Councillor Tony Jones.
Right. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest? Yes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to declare absolutely no interest in item 13. Thank you.
All right, then we'll go on to item number 3, which is minutes of the meeting that were held on the 12th and 19th of May. You've all got the minutes. Are we all agreed? Item 4, announcements. I've just got one, which I'd like to actually say thank you very much to those that have donated to the Mayor's charity. We're on the starting block, but a long way to go yet. So, but thank you. And I do believe that Chief Executive, you have got an announcement to make.
Madam Mayor, this is an announcement in relation to devolution and options for unitary local government. In relation to discussions, I would advise members that Hampshire County Council have issued a cabinet paper today for their cabinet meeting on the 6th of June, which proposes option D from the report that they commissioned from Deloitte, circulated previously to members. Option D is a county-based unitary local authority to provide services to 1.3 million residents, as the option which appears most advantageous to them. It is the view of officers of this council that the Deloitte report is too narrowly drawn to form the basis of a detailed consideration of options for unitary local government for Hampshire in general and Basingstoke-and-Deane in particular. Leaders and chief executives across the Heart of Hampshire authorities have met and agreed that a more holistic options appraisal process should be undertaken. Those leaders and chief executives have also agreed that that work should be led by Basingstoke-and-Deane Borough Council in collaboration with other local authorities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right, then we go on to item 5, which was questions from the members of the public, and there are none. Item 6, petitions. Again, I've not been notified, so there are none. Item 7, resignations and appointments, 7A. Are there any changes to committee? Yes, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one change to the substitutes for the Manydown Overview Committee. Councillor Elaine Steele to come off and to be replaced by Councillor Ken Rattigan.
Are there any others? Is that agreed? No? Is that agreed? Yeah. Is that agreed? Right. And resignations from outside bodies or reappointments? None? Nothing to agree to. So, item 8, I think you've all got on the agenda. Can I just ask, are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right. Item 9, the adoption of Oakland-Deane Neighbourhood Plan. I believe that Councillor Fell, you would like to introduce the paper.
Madam Mayor, following a positive referendum results in the Oakland-Deane Neighbourhood Plan, I formally move that this council makes this neighbourhood plan. And if you agree to so make it, Madam Mayor, it will become forthwith part of the statutory development plan for its area and will be used alongside national planning guidance and our own local plan. Madam Mayor, as you all know, neighbourhood plans may not be required or needed for every village across our borough. However, where villages recognise that development of more than a few houses is both inevitable and to some degree desirable, a neighbourhood plan enables them to shape where that development can take place. In the Oakland-Deane Neighbourhood Plan, in the foreword, it aptly and concisely sets out what it sought to achieve. A neighbourhood plan has many benefits. The Oakland-Deane Neighbourhood Plan has been developed by volunteers from the parish to protect the villages from uncontrolled, large-scale or poorly placed development, to allocate the number of dwellings according to the wishes of the community, to ensure that development is sympathetic to and improves the look and feel of the villages, to protect the area immediately east of Oakley from development. And it goes on to mention about reaping the benefits from the community infrastructure levy. Madam Mayor, in so proposing this, and I'm going to sit down and if you can take this as my speech in support, I would like to pay tribute to those who brought this plan together. We should commend them on their hard work and attention to detail. Furthermore, as the first such plan to be made, it will become a good example to other villages on how such a plan can be drawn up. I'd like to thank our officer team for the support that they have given to that planning group. Like all plans, its strength and influence will only become apparent when applications are judged against it. I hope that its policies and analysis proves to be robust and that it is a helpful document for those determining planning applications. So I so move it.
And is there a seconder? Councillor Reid. Yes. Councillor Reid is agreed. Yes, that's agreed. Yeah. So I'm still trying to learn to do this after nagging you all about using your mics. I do apologise. Right, item 10, the local plan. Again, I believe it's you, Councillor Fell, that would like to propose this paper.
Well, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the local plan, and if it's appropriate, I'd like to introduce it for members now. Let me begin. We have a local plan. It is sound, and I would like to move it and hope that you all agree it or don't vote it down even if you've got issues with it, because it is a compromise for all of us. And I'd like to move that you take note of the red writing in the yellow papers and that we withdraw the save policies tonight. I dare say there may be some members who thought they'd never hear me say that we have a local plan. But so I want to begin with some thanks. My thanks go to the people of our borough who have engaged with us repeatedly, and I could even underline that, throughout this lengthy process. My thanks go to the officers and former officers, Andrew Hunter and Jill Fisher, who led on this process, and those who very closely supported them, and I note that there are many, but Joe Bromley and Mark Lambert in particular, who worked so hard through committee and putting up with all our questions again and again, sometimes asking the same question week after week. I'd like to pay special thanks, of course, to Jill Fisher, who has announced that she'll be leaving us later this year. She picked this up at the point that we first engaged with the inspector, and that being a point which, in my judgment, was critical and potentially one where we were the most vulnerable, because an inspector could have said anything at that moment in time, but fortunately he didn't, and was very positive and assisted us, and she led the necessary adjustments to that plan to the success that we now have. My thanks go to the EPH committee for carefully analysing and redrafting the policies. And my thanks go to those of you who made the decision to approve this plan prior to examination. I'd like, Madam Mayor, if you give me the opportunity, to mention some highlights. We have a housing figure that is sound. It is below that which we had in the last plan and below that which we were told by our critics we would have to have. We have an affordable housing requirement of 40% that is sound, which we were told by some critics outside this chamber was too high, and by critics on your left, Madam Mayor, that it was too low. Our assessment of housing land supply was sound. And when we look back on this plan, and when members start to read it when looking at planning applications in their wards, we will see that within the text of the policies, our hands having written those policies. So to give just some examples, in the supporting text for the Manydown site, there is the mention of a need for a western bypass. In the SS6, the policy designed to assist those with small-scale development in the countryside, it was drafted by us members in committee, and it still has in the supporting text the need for to listen to parish councils and the relevance of local need. When we look at policy CN1 on affordable housing, It has words in it that came directly from Councillor Harvey that we put in that policy. In policy CN6, it states that infrastructure will be provided prior to occupation, an express wish of the EPH committee. In policy EM1, landscape character, I remember adding in words drafted by Councillor Mrs Cubitt at her express request. They are in that policy. Policy EM2 on strategic gaps, I remember drafting the first draft of that policy myself, and for the committee amending it, and it's now become a sound policy. Policy EP4 on the rural economy, I remember John Leake's words about
You have
traffic
1 minute.
generation. They're all in our policy, and I could go on. Madam Mayor, we have to learn lessons from the past, and those lessons are that we need good communication and transparency. And in my view, where we have got to now is that we have 3 tests of our for us to have good planning policy. Firstly, we need the public's confidence in what we do. Secondly, we need this council meeting's approval. And thirdly, we need a planning inspector's approval. If we ignore any of those 3, the policy and a plan will fail. Good communication and transparency have been my bywords throughout the whole of this process whilst I've been in charge of it. And it's my intention for that to continue into the future. Madam Mayor, we will have some issues to raise in the due course. We've got to wrestle with SIL coming up soon. We've got a transport strategy we need to look at.
Sorry, your time is out.
But all I will say is I'm so glad that we are here now. And please, members, don't derail it now. Please approve it.
Right, is there a seconder? Right, right, who was seconding? Sorry, I saw 3 hands go up all together. Councillor Miller then, all right? And if anybody wishes to speak, would they now put their hands up, please, so we can... Right. Sorry, Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before this went to the Planning Inspector, I voted against it. The changes made by the Planning Inspector, though described as major, are extremely minor, and I shall probably vote against it tonight. The residents I represent are not happy with this. They do not support it. For those who haven't been following it, 70% of the greenfield housing proposed in this plan is either in our ward or immediately adjacent to it. The sites that are in our ward are along the A30. The infrastructure delivery plan recognises that tens of millions need to be spent on the roundabouts. The plan says that that funding will come through SIL, and we all know that SIL won't raise anything like that. And when we mentioned it to the planning inspector, he said basically, well, SIL never does raise enough. We do not regard that as an adequate protection for our residents. For the development that will be just outside the ward, some of it will be highly visible from the village of Oakley, only 300 metres away. We do not regard that as an adequate strategic gap. It's a gap, but it's not strategic. And if Councillor Fell has his wish and puts a bypass through it, it'll be even smaller. Residents feel that the whole process with the inquiry in public was highly unsatisfactory. Lots of representations were made to the planning inspector by parish councils, residents' groups, borough councillors, even experts paid for by the residents. There were written comments, detailed presentations, and almost none of that is reflected in his report, and the stuff that's reflected in his report gets dismissed in a very short form. So I just want to record that my residents are unhappy. I dare say many will be relieved that we have a plan and not no plan, but it's not the plan we wanted, and we do not understand why this council abandoned its previous policy of trying to spread development fairly around the borough and around the town, and have taken the easy option of dumping all of it, almost all of it, either in or adjacent to our ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I tried to get as many names down, so I'll say the names, and then if I haven't given your name, you can then put up your hand, so we make sure that everybody that wants to speak can speak. I've got Councillor Gary Watts, Councillor Colin Fillimore, Councillor Gavin James, Councillor Honolly Cubitt, Councillor Paul Harvey, Councillor Tristan Robinson, and that's the names I've got. Was there anybody that I've missed, please? Right, Councillor Dindhay. Sorry, the next one is Councillor Gary Watts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd also like to thank the officers for all their patience and professionalism over the years, dealing with High Court judgments and changing governments and changing government policies and Tory administration disagreement over housing numbers. So they've done very well to get to us to this, in getting us through this inspection. But that's about as far as it goes, Madam Mayor. I will not be supporting this local plan. In the first amendment from the inspector, he states including consumption in favour of sustainable development. What does this mean? It's tying the hands of councillors in this chamber. It's tying the hands of development control. So much for localism. If we reject a planning application, it's going to get overturned because it's in this local plan, and areas that have been identified in the SLAR, the settlement boundaries, they're all going to be given. So what does that mean? We have no say anymore. Localism out the window. Why are we here as local councillors if we can't decide what housing goes in our particular area? You look at the areas that are in the settlement boundary, which is identified in the SLAR. We have 40 houses at Newnham Bassett in Winklebury that's going to go through on the nod. We have 20 houses at Old Kempshot Lane. Again, it's just going to go through on the nod, even if we reject it. And there are a dozen houses at British Legion in Bramley that's just going to go through on the nod. Forget what local feelings, what local councillors think. And in Southam and Kempshot Ward, the county, our friends the county, have identified a playing field in Downgrange surplus to requirements. It's not surplus to requirements, Madam Mayor. It's used by the communities. It's used by all the communities in the area for dog walking, footballing, and the county just want to take it away and turn it into 100 homes. And we've got our hands tied. And you look at Beggarwood. We've got 2,000 houses going up in Beggarwood. Kennel Farm, there's 300 houses going up there at the moment. That started building. There's Hampson Fields, they'll be starting that there in the next year, 750. And then in the golf course, we're starting a couple of years after. There's only provision for a local junior school after 2018. And that phase gap at Hampson Fields is a 10-year gap. So we could get the junior school at the end of the 10 years. So that interim, the county are actually going to ship kids from the top Beggarwood all the way down to Southam, Parkview in Pimpleton Road. It's absurd. So how can we vote for a plan like that that's going to get kids travelling 2 to 3 miles at peak rush hours? It's just ridiculous. And the funding, I think it's already mentioned. I mean, there is no funding. I think it was identified at committee there was a 200 million shortfall. We haven't got a seal in place. 106 is going. I mean, even on the A30 itself, it's been identified 30, 40 million pounds that we needed to accommodate all that development that's going up there. So I just can't support it, Madam Mayor. I mean, I cannot vote for a local plan. It will make Basingstoke a worse place in years to come. So I should be voting against this local plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Colin Phillips.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I speak against the local plan. It is my belief that it delivers more benefits to developers than it does to the residents of our borough. But the presumption in favour of development, coupled with this administration's housing strategy, will have detrimental effects on many of our residents. Future developments have to be sustainable and not just the subject of a developer's free-for-all. Developers cannot just come in, build their allocated quota and disappear with no concerns about infrastructure. We need to build the right sort of houses to address all our residents' needs and in the right locations. We cannot have a society divided into haves and have-nots. We have heard previously in this chamber from the Deputy Leader and others opposite the favourite word in the Tory vocabulary, aspiration. However, there are residents in our borough whose aspirations are simple. They just want a roof over their heads and have a level of the services to support their community. We cannot forget those residents who do invaluable jobs in our borough on the minimum wage or the living wage, or who are let down by the lack of affordable housing opportunities. 40% affordable housing, i.e. 80% of the market value, leaves many residents deprived by the system. We shouldn't need the private sector to provide overinflated rental accommodation. We should be delivering decent, reasonably priced housing to rent. Those of us who attended last Monday's cabinet meeting were not surprised to hear the leader inform us that the party which he belongs to has an appalling record of delivering services to our residents, because we knew that already. It shouldn't be an aspiration of our residents to visit a doctor at a convenient time, for their children to attend a children's centre or school in their neighbourhood, for residents to have access to a library near their home, or travel on public transport on roads without potholes. Madam Mayor, planning is more than a numbers game, especially in the rural areas of our borough. The inconvenient truth in the local plan is that the allocation of houses to the rural areas seems to be done on an inequitable political bias, i.e. on areas of least resistance from the Conservative opposition. I'll concede on Oakley. The debacle in the delay of delivering the local plan by the Tories, aided and abetted by the Liberal Democrats, has left our villages unprotected from unwanted and extra development. In Overton, we've had an additional 120 houses approved already, and we're now asked to take at least another 150 homes. The infrastructure of a village built around a medieval street grid plan will just not cope with this additional development, but who's listening? In Whitchurch, a traffic survey commissioned by our own council warned against development on the south side of the town. But guess where the recent large planning application of 100 homes has been allocated? Yes, on the south side of the town. Hardly an example of joined up planning policy. Development in our local rural locations should reflect the need of the local residents, from which some have been excluded. The much heralded neighbourhood planning process has proven to be no defence against speculative developers, as residents of Bramley and Oakley have witnessed. So for all the aforementioned reasons, I should be voting against the local plan.
Right, next speaker will be Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was elected in 2008, and at that point we were starting the local plan due for adoption in 2010. We looked at all the evidence to put forward into that local plan. It made it very clear the minimum number of houses that the borough required to support its population was 751. At the time, the Liberal Democrats had a conversation about that. And what we recognise is if you were born in Oakley or born in Overton, you should be able to grow old there, have your family there and live there, because people form those local connections. It's important to give communities together. So therefore it was right that we looked at the evidence and we based the housing figure on each area of the borough on what the need was to support the ageing population. And let's be clear, the reason for the need for homes is people are living longer, there is a whole generation to house, the number of people living in each home has fallen, as effectively the empty nesters have longer to live without their children in place. And obviously the many down was going to be the solution to the Basingstoke problem, where many of the wards are landlocked, you can't develop, you'd have to expand the town, and we'd bought many down specifically for that purpose. That should have been approved in 2010. Had we done that, we'd have had 6 years to plan the infrastructure. Now, people talk a lot about infrastructure and how the infrastructure is going to come first, but you can't go to County Hall and say, we need a new primary school, because they will say, where? Oh, we don't know yet, we're not sure where we're going to build the houses. You can't ask for roads to be improved until you know exactly where you're going to build homes, where people are going to travel, so what roads need to be improved. So it's very important we got our local plan adopted and approved as soon as possible. So why the delay, Madam Mayor? 6 years late. This is a speech I should have given 6 years ago, but no. And the blame for that has to land absolutely squarely at the Conservatives' door, those lucky enough to have a door in the housing shortage we have. We all remember the Basing In Touch that told us that they've done their research, 250 homes a year is all we need, and that will be fine, and the planning inspector will tick it off, no problem at all. Well, that didn't kind of work. Then we came back and we had something about 350. And we all remember the Whitchurch Focus that had 10 bold statements. All 10 were absolute wrong in the end. And it said, thanks to your Conservatives and getting rid of that nasty old Labour government, we've agreed that there will only be 594 homes a year built in Basingstoke-on-Deane. That was about 3 years ago. It took a long time for the Conservatives to agree that the Liberal Democrats were absolutely right all along. Unfortunately, the 6 years lost are 6 years we should have been concentrating on the infrastructure, to deal with the issues that people mentioned in terms of roads and schools, doctor surgeries. All those things should have been addressed over the last 6 years, finding the funding, making sure that we got the local plan right. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened. Tories have delayed it. I will mention, of course, that there is another group in this council. It's not just Lib Dems and Tories, there is a Labour group. Their contribution to the local plan has been amazing. Here we are, 8 years after I joined the council, have absolutely no idea how many homes a year Labour would build. I have absolutely no idea where they would build them. They've opposed everything along the line. The only thing they've ever said is a bold statement, 50% affordable. Well, 50% of 2 is 1. One affordable home. Are we to assume that's the Labour policy? It's great opposing the administration. I accept that's their job, opposition. I would rather improve and deliver for local residents and make sure we get the best local plan possible. They've been silent. They've failed the people of this town who sit on the housing lists, sit in the registers. The young people, the young families emerging in places like Overton who are fearing they may have to be forced to move to the town because no one is standing up for them. Through fear, they have stayed away from the debate. It's been a big disappointment to me and a big disappointment to many others. There have been some positive contributions from certain members.
You have 1 minute.
I've sat on EPH and I have made positive recommendations, but it's pointless opposing unless you're offering an alternative. Madam Mayor, the local plan is not perfect. I would love to see a solar panel installed in every south-facing roof we build, but unfortunately the Conservative government have announced that they've got rid of all that green crap, apparently. Indeed, I'd like to see an off-road parking space for every dwelling we build, and if it's got more than 3 bedrooms, it should have 2 off-road parking spaces, but of course, we've got the legacy of the Prescott policies to stop that. In this local plan, we have to be realistic. We cannot impact on national government policies. We have to get something in place that delivers the best for our residents. This plan is not what I would have written. It's not what any of us would have written, because 60 different local plans would have emerged if you'd sent us away to do it. But I believe it delivers the best and most secure future for the borough. It does allow us to now start working on those infrastructure deficits we know we have to fill, and hopefully we can work collectively together in the best interest of our residents as we look to the infrastructure rather than the original local plan. So I will be supporting it tonight.
Right. The next is Councillor Onley Kubit.
I would just like to say that I will be supporting the plan. It's been a torturous process, but I would like to congratulate Councillor Mark Raphael and for all the employees of the council, particularly Jill Fisher, who I think was utterly outstanding, and Mark Lambert, but the whole team were brilliant. And whilst it's not perfect, there are things in all of our wards that we're unhappy with. It is a great result that we have a plan that is considered sound by the inspector and that we can take forward to address the infrastructure issues going forward. So I will be supporting this plan, and I congratulate Councillor Raphael for an outstanding management of the portfolio.
Thank you very much for your nice slow speech. Next, I'd like to call Councillor Tristan Robinson, which I believe will be his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For the past 5 years, the residents of this borough have unfortunately been subject to planning by appeal. Far too many applications in rural areas have been rejected by this council's Development Control Committee, only to be approved by a far-removed inspector. This plan will change that. It will finally give certainty to residents and provide a first line of defence against speculative development. This plan asks us to build 850 homes a year, over 15,000 by 2029, and it asks for a fifth of those to be placed in my ward, namely on Manydown. When we are delivering these new homes, we need to ensure that our rural communities are not swamped by the urban area. The residents of Wootton St Lawrence face the prospect of being joined to the town and quite rightly ask, why us? the proposed country park is an absolute necessity to retain the separate identity and character of Wotton St Lawrence and restrict the coalescence between the new development and the existing village. As Councillor O'Fell has mentioned, the plan will also give us a strategic gap policy. It is really important that we maintain the separate identity of settlements rather than allowing our rural villages to become part of an urban conurbation. I know that Popley is close to your heart, Madam Mayor, but the residents of Sherburn St John have asked that your empire doesn't get any closer to them. The pain of this local plan will need to be mitigated by the provision of adequate infrastructure. We are currently car-friendly in Basingstoke, and we are all grateful to the foresight of those who built the ring road in the 1970s. We all know that there will eventually be over 12,000 homes delivered to the west of Basingstoke, and the existing road network cannot cope. We need to grasp the nettle now, as our predecessors did, for the long term, up to 2050 and beyond. It is a great shame that the delivery of a western bypass has been deleted from this plan by the inspector, but I know that the portfolio holder will be working hard for a bypass taking traffic from the A339 down to Junction 7, and it needs to be top of the list of the new infrastructure development strategy for both Manydown and the southwest of Basingstoke. To the north, we need to stop rat running through villages such as Monk Sherborne to get from the A339 to the A340 and up to Tadley. We need to look at reopening Rooksdown Lane as a solution to this problem, which will only get worse as Manydown becomes a reality. Affordable housing is a key issue for young people, as we have heard tonight. Having read policy CN1, I would ask though, who are we building these houses for? Young couples currently living with parents working full-time on minimum wage in our borough are not eligible for housing benefit and do not have a reasonable preference. They are not eligible then for 70% of the affordable homes that we would be building. I believe we need to update the council policy to include low-cost starter homes and a greater affordable housing mix in line with new government guidance. Then we will be helping young people who work hard afford their own home. With the right infrastructure in place, this local plan will give residents the certainty that they need. They deserve to know how their communities will be shaped in the years to come. For many areas, this plan will become the first line of defence against speculative development, and I hope that we can work hard to provide homes in a better way for young people across Basingstoke and Deane.
Thank you. That was an excellent speech. Next, I'll call Councillor Paul Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's taken us over 8 years to get to this stage tonight, as others have already mentioned. The actual date on the local plan is from 2011 to 2029. Now, there's been some real trials along the way, and I do mean actual hearings and court cases, in fact. But we're now presented with a plan that also is a series of recommendations from one of our government inspectors. Now, people will say that the plan is the best we have, it's the one that we've got, and that you should support it. But if we actually honestly acknowledge to the people of Basingstoke what the future of development in our town and borough will be like under this plan and under government policy, which go hand in hand, then most of the strategic sites contained in the plan have already been granted planning permission outside of the plan. They will not make a significant contribution to the infrastructure deficit that rests at the heart of this plan. Living in Hatchwarren or Kempshott or Chinham or Beggarwood, I would be worried about the lack of planning for the real infrastructure needs that the scale of development will actually create. These sites provide a real problem for sustaining a 5-year housing land supply, as the focus will no longer be on planned sites to increase numbers that the government are driving up without any supporting funding for infrastructure. It will be through windfall, or it will be through not sites that are directly identified in the plan, but that will put huge pressure on existing infrastructure, which will prove inadequate. We know that from the studies that have been shown in the process getting us this far. So there is a real question of over how long a 5-year housing land supply will last, and then what impact will the developer market have on places like Old Basing, Overton and Whitchurch, when those developers are not constrained and seek to promote new strategic sites. The sadness is that the government inspector's recommendations are actually going to harm the developer and remove the balance from the planning system. A local presumption in favour of development is exactly what it says on the tin. Any site coming forward that simply conforms to the policy framework should and can therein be granted planning permission. And there may be good reasons to reject sites that are coming forward, but it will mean nothing, because the local presumption in favour of development will undermine the development control process and will hand the developer the appeal on a plate. And we will have nothing but to say yes to that, and the judgment will be completely undermined of our development control process. Now, over the years, I've heard an awful lot about top-down planning, particularly criticism from other members opposite in this chamber, lambasting the Labour government through top-down regional assemblies. Now, I tell you, this has got to be, at the moment, the most top-down planning system ever invented. This is government directive coming down that you will grow, and you will grow the way we want you to, with policy handed down on high. In the old South East Plan, the rest of Basingstoke, as it was called, in other words, not the town, had a figure of some 30 units a year identified. Well, now our towns and villages face a far more significant challenge from developers. Neighbourhood plans will no longer be a maximum, they will only be minimums. And in essence, our towns and villages have just worked up plans that will open the door to far greater development than they have envisaged, because of the presumption in favour of development, and because developers that might have got 50 units in a neighbourhood plan will now be back on those sites for more and more and more, because they have a principle of development established in the neighbourhood plan, and the local presumption in favour of development gives them the right to do it. And there will be very little that DC can do about it. And when it comes to numbers, we've been all over the place with numbers. From organic growth, do you remember that? Way back in 2008? Through 590, 750, 800, and now to a delivery schedule of over 1,000 a year, if you look at what is proposed to be delivered in the context of the local plan. And that's all before we get anywhere near windfall sites, or those permitted development right sites that don't need to come to planning, don't need this council's approval, but developers can just go straight ahead and convert offices and other buildings straight into accommodation. Unless this council understands that people on low wages and in work, aspiring to a roof over their heads, need a range of products, a lot of which developers are not going to provide easily, we risk building homes for a population looking on, aspiring yes, but not being able to afford. The plan's policy around viability give developers a get-out-of-jail card. Unless we lead in a way that doesn't simply serve the government's agenda or some ideological agenda you may have over there, but understands the real housing need we have in the borough, then this plan, when we look back, will be seen to have failed. And to be honest, none of us want that. We want the housing that meets people's needs, that offers them an opportunity to live securely and rented, owned or part-owned, that actually meets the needs of people in the borough. And I make no apology for using the word need. I won't be supporting the plan, Madam Mayor. It is a Pandora's box opened for bad development. The one thing we need, Madam Mayor, is hope, and I do mean the word hope, that the local plan, when it's reviewed, can be made much better.
Right, thank you. I have 3 speakers left. I'll say who they are, and then if I've missed anybody, you can put your hands up. I've got Councillor Keith Watts, Councillor Ian Tilbury, and finally Councillor Diane Taylor. Have I missed anyone? That's good then. Councillor Keith Watts.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't prepare what I was going to say. I thought I was coming to a love fest today. I'm really rather sad. Having heard what Mr. John MacDonald has to say, wanting 100,000 council houses a year, just forget whether they're council or not, I thought Labour were for once going to be in favour of houses being built. Because up until now, they've voted against every opportunity to be in favour of houses being built. And it's going to be interesting when Mr. MacDonald's commissars come out to Basingstoke and Dean, and where are we going to put these houses? We haven't got a plan, if we listen to them. Now, it's nearly 3 years since I left my family at the seaside to come here, because I knew that some Conservatives had perhaps sound reasons for not supporting the plan as it was then, and to support the great work I thought Councillor Raphael had started. And I can't understand how it took so long, but I did say then, and my colleagues, my Liberal Democrat colleagues were pointing out needs for improvement, that we cannot now get a better plan. And the plan hasn't changed a great deal since then, except a bit more expansion than I expected out of the examination in public. I'm older than Councillor Harvey, so the first local plan I tried to influence was the one under the 1966 Labour government. And at no time since then has any government reduced its housing target. We weren't deceived. The Conservative members here were deceived into believing that their government was not going to make them build houses. When I joined this council, I was against the South East Plan, which was then policy, because it didn't provide enough housing in the rest of Hampshire. Then suddenly we went mad. I'm not going into all the detail of what went wrong. We went mad as a council and believed that we were bottom up and we were going to decide it. I was a bit unnerved when Councillor Gavin James mentioned a Whitchurch focus. I should say that a large headline was sheer folly, addressed at the 594 figure. Now, when in the whole of this time has any individual Labour member or the Labour group moved an amendment to this plan? I don't remember any at all. And yet a lot of what's been said here could have been moved and seconded and debated in committee or on the floor of this council. So Mr MacDonald's going to be very disappointed when it comes to Basingstoke and Dean that we haven't got a clue what Labour policy is for planning for housing in Basingstoke and Dean. And we don't know yet whether they even support a 40% allowance for affordable housing, because they've never voted for a proposition that has that in it. So I'm very disappointed. I had thought that there was a change of heart and it was now respectable for Labour councillors to support the building of houses, but it seems not to be the case. Councillor Golding, I greatly respect. He was an extremely helpful, participative cabinet member for planning, but the clash between that and his local commitments to his ward, I think, were too much for him. But I can understand why he's going to vote against this. But please, please, everyone support this plan. It is going to be absolutely disastrous if we go on without any plan. We have, I mean, as predicted, we've had, I mean, even in my ward, houses being built on appeal in the wrong place because we didn't have a local land supply.
You have 1 minute.
And it's really important that we do that tonight. And I do respect the problem that Councillor Sanders and Councillor Raphael had 3 years ago because of complete shambles that had been going on before that. But they have actually delivered on that. They haven't delivered everything I would have wanted, or probably not everything they would have wanted themselves. But we've now got to the stage we have a plan that we can take to defensible purposes. The mention that was made specifically by Councillor Phillimore of a site in Whitchurch, now we've been through a long process, and the beginning of the process is that land has to be available, supportable, deliverable. And if people haven't made land available, perhaps Mr MacDonald will have a different idea. We can't make them put it forward for housing. Yes, my time is up. Vote for this local plan, and then let's work together to make the best of it.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Ian Tilbury.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Keep watching, you turn your mic off. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I'd like to pay tribute to Councillor Raphael. It's only a pity they didn't put him in charge sooner. We might have got where we are, wherever that is, a lot sooner. And he's certainly done a good job in trying to get it back on track, and I think he's done it and done a genuine job. The problem is what we've ended up with is a dog's breakfast, isn't it? I mean, unfortunately, I'm struggling to read. I had an eye operation, so I can't see with reading glass, and I can't see without them. But the problem is, if you look at 4.25, when it refers to Overton, which sums up the problem, it isn't just Overton. Overton's given a greenfield site allocation of 120 new homes. Because and the argument for that was there were 115 households in housing need in Overton, Laverstoke and Steventon Ward. Well, there were, but of course the housing policy changed that. That's actually 40 people now, and there's going to be 48 affordable homes built on the 120 of the 120 new homes. So that more than meets our affordable housing need. But on top of that, we've been landed with another 150 homes through the rather dubious neighbourhood planning process. So who's going to have the affordable housing on there? Well, not people from Overton, because they're going to be putting the houses on the 120. The tragedy, I mean, Councillor Watts refers to the government building 100,000 council houses. Well, if they wanted to put 150 council houses in Overton, and they actually went to people who actually wanted them in Overton. And I don't just mean people who are on an affordable housing list, but the way they used to allocate them to people in reasonable incomes, in proper ordinary jobs, because the reality is now most people are either too poor to be able to live in affordable housing, and nowhere near rich enough to be able to afford to buy a home. I mean, the cheapest house for sale in Overton at the moment is about £240,000 for a tiny 2-bedroom cottage with no garden and nowhere to park. And what sort of income would you need to be able to buy a house like that as a young couple? £50,000 a year probably wouldn't get you a mortgage on that, but it would exclude you from the affordable housing list. We have a ridiculous policy, and we have a ridiculous situation in this country where we're going to be building houses not for local people, because that's what it says here. This is to meet these homes will deliver through mechanisms. Here we are. It's been made to meet the longer-term needs of the village through policy SS5. Well, it's not the longer-term needs of Overton, because no one from Overton can afford to buy these houses. And they won't be able to get the affordable ones anyway, because they won't be able to meet the needs of the housing list. So it's absolutely farcical. But the reality is when you look at this, on page 48, a few pages before that, it shows a housing trajectory. In the next 3 years, we've got a treble house building in this borough. And will be criticised by the government for the councils failing to provide sufficient housing. Well, we don't build houses, do we? We used to. The council used to build them. We were very good at it. At one time, half the houses in Overton had been built by the council, and another 100 had been built by the local landowner who owned the paper mill. We actually were quite good at providing housing back in the 50s and 60s and the 70s, but that all came to a rather dismal end in the 1980s onwards, and we've not really recovered. And at the moment, there is no mechanism for actually providing what most people in the middle in this country need, which is housing they can afford. And at the moment, this isn't going to help at all. And as for the housing trajectory, the idea that the developers will actually build these houses is pie in the sky. They'll build them where they can make the most profit, but that's not going to be where we actually need them. I've no doubt they'll build all the houses in Overton and sell them to rich Londoners who will come down on the train and then spend all the time moaning about the church bells ringing and mud on the road, as they do at the moment, but it's not going to benefit anyone in my ward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I have Councillor Diane Taylor, and I have a notification Councillor Frost wants to speak after.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for letting me speak. I won't repeat what I said at the last debate about the local plan, but what I said then remains. I won't repeat what Councillor Golding has said, but I do agree with everything that he said. The portfolio holder calls it a compromise. I can honestly say I don't see any compromise in favour of my ward. But we have got a plan to vote on. Mission accomplished, but for me, mission accomplished at the expense of the quality of life of the people in my ward, both north and south. 74% of housing dumped to the west. And conveniently, an extra field added to the Manydown site, which ruins the historic hamlet of Newfound by virtual coalescence with the town. But my disillusionment with the local plan actually has been superseded by the amazing examination in public exercise. I couldn't believe it. It was 5 weeks it took for us to honestly give everything we could. We go to the meetings, we bring the inspector along to look at some of the sites, we send in our consultation exercise, we do everything the legitimate way, and it was a complete waste of time. And I do not know how it can take 6 months to wield a rubber stamp. 6 months. It amazes me. And the icing on the cake of disillusionment for me is that in amongst the pronouncement of the inspector, there was the simple pronouncement that we are allowed to calculate our 5-year housing land supply in the way that we asked to, with the 5% buffer and spreading it out over the local plan period. And that means that instantly we have a 5-year housing land supply. We don't even have to wait for tonight's vote for that. We have it. Now, that inspector could have made that pronouncement after just a few weeks or even a few days, but he didn't. He waited 6 months for that. Now, if we'd had it just a few weeks earlier, we might have saved Bramley from 2 unwanted housing developments. We might have saved Ashford Hill from an unwanted housing development, and we would have had a very useful weapon in fighting the appeal for a housing estate in Oakley, which is in exactly the wrong place and totally not what the neighbourhood plan wants. So, of course, I'm very pleased with the Oakley and Dean neighbourhood plan. People have worked really, really hard to achieve it. Oakley has grown 1,000% since 1950. That's the biggest growth than anywhere in the whole borough. So it really does deserve to be protected. I take Councillor Watt's point about that strange sentence about continuing to presume in favour of sustainable development. I don't know what that means, but I too am very, very uncomfortable with that. And I think we have to be terribly cautious of that. All I can say is, strategic gap, great. I heard what the portfolio said. It's very proud of the strategic gap policy, but actually in the north of Oakley, it's one small field. It's going to do nothing at all. But hey, it's there now. I'm just very disillusioned. I think after 9 years, my naivety is finally gone. But there we go, 9 years in the council. But we've got this to vote on. I'm afraid I can't vote in favour of it because it is so devastating for my ward and for the people who live to the west of town. And I'm not happy with the way it's been drawn up at all. I like things to be above the radar. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe finally would be Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd first of all like to pay tribute to the officers and portfolio holder for doing what has actually been a sterling job under extremely trying times. We've heard from members opposite that developers under this plan will actually have carte blanche to build homes and then move on without putting infrastructure in place. But unfortunately this has been happening without a plan. So surely this plan is better than no plan at all. We've had the unwanted beech trees development in Oakley, which has been referred to by my fellow councillor, okay, which was actually approved on appeal due to the lack of a local plan. So therefore, this plan is better than no plan. And I'd like to congratulate Oakley and Dean, okay, for actually bringing their local plan to be made. And I'm looking forward to North Waltham doing exactly the same in the very near future, with a lot of help from officers. So I'm pleased that in the local plan there is a strategic gap strategy, but I have to say, with my fellow ward councillors, 300 metres with possibly a road going through it, that's not a strategic gap, okay? But unfortunately, this plan is better than no plan at all. So reluctantly, unlike my fellow ward councillors, I will be supporting the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, as you seconded, did you want to speak?
It's all been said. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Fell, would you like to sum up, please?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Councillor Gavin James made some apt observations about the history of this planning process, but he made one error. He said that if we were given the opportunity as individual councillors to come up with a plan, we'd come up with 60 plans. I think he got that wrong. I think he meant 40, because, as we know, the Labour Party have no alternative plan. We have heard quite a lot of ranting tonight from the Labour group, ranting about national policy, which I have to say runs hollow, because we know that the Labour Party actively supports the Conservative Party's policy of increasing housing growth across the country, and indeed it would increase it if it could. So I think we can perhaps ignore them on that. The sad thing about tonight, of course, is this, that the public could easily be misled by what has been taking place. There has been a spirit of cooperation that has grown in the last few years between the members of the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats and some of the independents. There was a spirit of cooperation at the committee stage of this plan, where members of the Labour group, some of them were contributing, and some of their arguments were taken on board by all concerned from different parties, and in a spirit of compromise. But as soon as this plan left the committee, it was that spirit of compromise from the Labour Party was rejected. And I have to say that is a sad thing. we worry about why that is. It seems the Labour Party are more worried about being accused of selling out by compromising than they are about actually what the public want, which is us coming together to agree something for the benefit of all the public, those who have political views and those who have none. And sadly, we hear anecdotal evidence of members of the Labour group who would have loved to have worked closer with us on this plan and would have loved to be supporting this plan today to say that it's their plan too. But unfortunately, they've been silenced. So that's with some sadness. But regardless of them, I ask all members, Madam Mayor, to vote in favour of this plan. It is sound as defined by the planning inspector, and therefore I ask members to support it.
Right, now I'd like to put that to the vote, and I'm going to go by. Right, calling for recorded vote, are you?
Yeah.
Those in favour of electronic vote? You're going to do it, right, thank you. Okay, the electronic vote is open. I've just been reminded the vote is yes for adoption of the plan and no against, as per the paper. Right, we're about to close the vote, so if everybody wants to vote, make sure you voted. Now closing the vote. Right, as you can see, the vote is 32-20. The motion's carried. Right, now, item number 11, which is the devolution across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'm going to attempt to do two things at once, which, as you may know, for a man is rather difficult. And secondly, I'm going to, firstly, I'm going to introduce the paper, and then secondly, I'm going to move an amendment to the recommendations, which is as per the orange papers that we have, and that is going to be seconded by Councillor Harvey, and that's virtually impossible, but we'll attempt to do it as best we can.
Obviously listen to what I said.
Madam Mayor, if I may begin. The debate on...
Will you please begin?
Thank you. Oh, we can't have that. The debate on devolution has been going on now for so long and has taken so many twists and turns that it is probably worth reminding ourselves why we engaged in it in the first place. We initially had two key objectives. The first was to improve the quality of the services that we deliver to our residents, and the second was to safeguard the assets and resources that currently enable us to provide services to residents that they rate very highly, both for quality and value for money. In both cases, our residents, their needs, their desires, their expectations are at the heart of our approach. They must be the focus of all that we do. But of course, we also have to be mindful of the pressures that there are on the ability of local government to deliver on those expectations. Whilst funding is reducing, and let's not tonight argue about whether that's right or what the causes are, it's a simple fact of life which we have to deal with. But at the same time, demands are increasing. Most notably, we have an expanding and an ageing population, but also with a growing demand for education facilities for our young people to fit them for work in the future. So we have to face the need to do more with less, which inevitably means we have to look at how the effectiveness of our local government can be improved. That is radically different from simply looking at how the cost of local government can be reduced. We saw the possibility of a combined authority as a potential way of achieving better service delivery for residents with minimum cost and minimum disruption, but at the same time securing the necessary funding guarantees from government to provide the infrastructure that we need. Sadly, Hampshire County Council's reluctance to participate means that the Heart of Hampshire bid for a combined authority cannot proceed for the time being. The County Council is depriving our residents of the funding and the service improvements that could have been secured. But that effectiveness needs improving. The County Council's performance in some aspects is, I'm afraid, not as good as they like to claim it is, or as it should be. When you look at where the problem areas are, it is in those sectors where the policy and decision-making lies too far away from the point of delivery, or works in disconnected silos. In transport, supporting people, early years provision, the borough is having to step in to maintain key services that were the responsibility of the county. In areas like education, where though our schools are local, we as a council have no role, performance is poor, despite the best efforts of our teachers, when you compare it with other towns like Guildford or Woking, Reading or Winchester. And which of us does not have an inbox filled with complaints about potholes? We believe that the best services are those delivered in the most effective and cost-efficient way by an organisation as close as possible to the people that use them. To improve, we need a fundamental review of how services are delivered and who is best fitted to deliver them. Just relying on the old model will not work, nor will simply cutting costs. I'm sorry to say that Hampshire County Council's approach to the common problems that we face has been the opposite to our resident-focused, bottom-up approach. They seem more concerned with safeguarding their own organisation and increasing its power than looking after their residents. Hence, the Hampshire mega-unitary concept unleashed without warning a few days ago. But the old-fashioned command and control mentality will not work in a modern society. That is localism in reverse. Local people expect to have a voice in matters that affect their lives. We need to ensure that form follows function and not the other way round. The basis of the Hampshire County Council proposal is weak.
Sorry, you have 1 minute.
I'll go as fast as I can, madam, but I'm speaking twice here. It contains many flaws and fails to address a number of key issues, most notably local participation in decisions affecting local people. To best serve our residents, we need a much better considered piece of research to identify and quantify the challenges ahead and then to develop alternative solutions. And those solutions must be as local as possible, but at the same time relevant and to scale. That is the proposal now coming forward, and this is my amendment, supported by the Heart of Hampshire group of councils and for which we are seeking financial approval this evening. The sum of money looks large, but that is because we will take the role as lead authority and have to budget the maximum full sum. In reality, we already have received pledges of financial contributions from a number of other authorities and with more to come, and I would expect the borough's participation to be substantially below half of the total. However, we have to ensure that we have all options analysed from a perspective that will give us guidance on the best solution, not for Hampshire as a whole, but specifically for Basingstoke and Deane. If members are happy to accept the amendment, I will of course ensure that there is a clear, open accountability for all expenditure and that all members are kept fully informed on progress, either directly from me to them or through group leaders. This will be an important piece of work in shaping the way that we live our lives in the future, both in this borough and beyond, and I trust that members will support the revised recommendations this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I was a little generous because it was a very slow start. But I won't always do so. Councillor Harvey, would you like to second?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In standing to second the amendment as proposed by Councillor Sanders, I think it's important for us to recognise why we have the words in the amendment and really the conversation we're having this evening. The County Council's announcement on a unitary authority for the whole of Hampshire quite simply amounts to an aggressive takeover bid of Basingstoke and Deane and every other district in Hampshire. They plan to wipe out the second tier of borough councils. So there's no doubt in my mind that if Basingstoke and Deane were to be consumed into a Hampshire-wide unitary authority, then we would see major and drastic changes to many of the things that we hold dear. This remote council would do terrible damage to the ambition and aspiration of our borough. The Deloitte report, commissioned by the county in secret, is based on a desktop analysis that really doesn't stack up to scrutiny, and it has not been scrutinised by county. We will have to scrutinise it for them. It's an expensive piece of work that does little and makes a very poor case for Perry's chosen option. And now taking it to Cabinet, without consultation, making the decision, is just simply disgraceful. But now we have the opportunity to do something far better and more innovative, securing the future of local government as close to the people of our borough as possible, and for us, that means a unitary authority for Basingstoke and Deane. Now, we need not panic our neighbouring councils by our desire to become a unitary. A unitary Basingstoke and Deane as a service hub for a wider health and social care partnership, for example, or as a wider transport authority, working alongside neighbouring districts in a new form of arrangement is entirely possible. We are into the art of the possible here, given our desire to stand up for Basingstoke and Deane, and not just to protect our assets that everybody else has their eyes on, but to realise our aspirations for our residents. So the amendment proposed does a number of key things. It adds weight to the argument against and clearly states that this council rejects the mega unitary for Hampshire proposed by the County Council. And we recognise a number of key facts, such that council tax will rise dramatically for our residents as a result of what the county proposes. That our assets and policies that give this council its unique position would be threatened by that proposal. A unitary Hampshire simply isn't in the interests of the people we represent. It also says, and this is an important bit, that this council will work to produce a case for Basingstoke and Deane, and that we want to build that case for a unitary Basingstoke and Deane, and the innovative shared services model we could look to. And we believe we have an opportunity to do something very positive, rooted in this council's strength, putting the people of Basingstoke and Deane first. And on that basis, I second the amendment and also welcome the leader's comments of reporting back to members, be it through all members, as in briefings, or directly through group leaders. But the important point is that we are all being communicated with, which is far more than the County Council has done at any point through this. Their deceitful approach to this is something that has been quite disgraceful, and that Cabinet report that the Chief Executive has alluded to, without any consultation, I think is just quite disgraceful.
Now, I think we seem to have got pretty much agreement across the floor. Are we all agreed on the amendment? Right. Sorry, it is just on the amendment. Once it's agreed, then we'll go back to the substantive, and then we will have debate. Right, so is that agreed on the amendment? Yes. Right, and that's unanimous. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to abstain on all discussions here tonight.
Okay. One abstention.
And you.
Yeah. And myself, of course. You've asked for a recorded vote, yes? All right.
So vote yes.
Right, so that's yes for... Yes. Right, we're voting on the amendment. That's yes for the amendment, no against, and those who wish to abstain can abstain. And it's now open. All right, everyone voted, now close the vote. The amendment's been carried. I think it's 51 for yes, none for no, and 2 abstentions. Okay, and now open for debate on the substantive. And
There were 2 people in speak.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Councillor James, we're ready for open for debate. So it's Councillor Gavin James, and then I have Councillor Mike Westbrook after.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll deal with the Hampshire County Council proposals first. When I first heard of them, I wrote down a number of words that I could use in a speech in future. On reflection, looking back at the words that I thought were appropriate to describe the way I feel about the leader of the County Council, I've decided that perhaps they're not so appropriate, certainly before the watershed. I call it my Lalakezia speech, and unfortunately you're not going to hear it tonight. I will instead give my subtle speech. Madam Mayor, the leader of the County Council has behaved like an idiot. Honestly believe that in any way devolution, that means putting power closer to the people so they have more influence, means centralising it all in county offices, is just beyond belief. He obviously didn't get the memo, or read it wrong, or read it backwards. It just baffles me. I am a Liberal Democrat. I've always believed in localism, and I think the council leader put it very well earlier when he said localism simply means that people have the decisions about services should be made as close to the people who they impact upon as is reasonably possible. And clearly those proposals don't do that. But the frustration with the leader of the county council goes beyond that. Because the leader of the county council decided back in March to commission the report. Throughout that period, he was sitting round tables with district council leaders and other executives talking about devolution and remodelling government. So in March, when he was on the phone to Deloitte, he could have said to the other council leaders, do you know what? We're looking at this piece of work. Are you interested as well? Give us your questions, give us the options you want explored, and together, collectively, we'll do one piece of work and we'll get some answers and some detailed information. It may have cost a bit more, but altogether, we'd have done that. Instead, the leader of the county council did nothing. The leader of our partnership council, I like to call him that, I don't believe it for the moment, but there we go, decided not to do that. He's left it. Tonight, we are talking about making a budget, £200,000, to investigate alternatives, to investigate what the impact would be if we looked at unitary ourselves or alone, what the opportunities are for combined authority. We have to do that, but we shouldn't, because county has already spent money on that. Had he been open and honest and worked with us as true partners, we would have saved money. So how appalling is it that a Tory leader of the county council has decided the best way to save money is to make sure local authorities have to spend more? He's already spent £90,000 of taxpayers' money seeking the answers he wants, and now we have to go out and spend more taxpayers' money getting the true answer. I'm very disappointed. A bit more than that, really. And we have to look at, does the county council really honestly believe it's going to get support from the districts? I've worked out what the county council plans are. Basically what the county council have done over the last decade or so is they've cut everything. They've actually run out of cuts to make. There is nothing left to cut. They now want to consume more power, so they've got more cuts that they can make. I remember when the county council used to subsidise buses more than we did. Long since gone. I remember when the county council used to run children's centres. That looks like it's going. County council used to have libraries and provide them with things like books. That doesn't happen anymore. They used to run household tips for long hours. They can't do that anymore. They used to fill potholes when they were small. Now apparently they have to be big enough to fit Basingstoke and Dean in before they come out and do anything about it. The county council has been an empire of failure. Why would we want any more services given to that? Madam Mayor, it's absolutely right. I fully support this as amended. It's important that we make sure we get what's best for Basingstoke and Dean residents. Our position here, we are here to create a prosperous borough, to provide services and an environment in which residents are free to reach their full potential and are able to influence the priorities and policies of the authority that serves them. I believe there is a common will to deliver that in this authority. I'm believing that there's anything like that in the county council. So I will support this, and I really do hope that the county council leader is listening. If he wants more information from me, my number's on the website, give me a call, and I can tell him all the words that I couldn't use tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Westbrook. Sorry, Michael Westbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From the moment in February 2016 when the government first met the Solent Council bosses to discuss a new combined authority deal led by an elected mayor, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight combined authority deal was done for. But interestingly, at the time, a DCLG spokesman said, "We've always been clear this is a bottom-up process and there is no one-size-fits-all approach, with every deal bespoke and providing arrangements that are relevant to each local area." We should take the DCLG up on that offer and put together our own bespoke deal and produce a document to show we can provide the arrangements, along with our partners in health, education and business that are relevant to our town, to our local area. Genuine devolution can empower communities, but only if the power passed down have the relevant purse strings attached. Otherwise, as is the danger with the current government version, devolution just becomes a cover for more cuts. But where power, money and responsibility are devolved together to an area like ours here in Basingstoke, they can be used in a much more tailored and effective way. Devolution, however, is pointless or worse if it is then followed by a slew of central government diktats overriding the newfound freedoms. Our devolution proposal must be based on democratic debate rather than deals cooked up behind closed doors by a chosen few. It must not simply look to replace unresponsive bureaucracy in Whitehall. It needs to give people a real say in how services are run. People need to feel ownership of it for it to work. It mustn't feel like a fait accompli forced upon them, nor an empty branding exercise. So we have to present devolution in terms that resonate with ordinary people, focusing on what it means for bread and butter issues like education, jobs and health. We need to develop an optimistic narrative full of positive examples of what devolution in action can help us to achieve for the residents of Basingstoke. Last September I said that the then devolution proposals had been like shifting sand, produced over a very short space of time. I would suggest that that statement is probably even more accurate today than it was 9 months ago. I also said that the whole process was moving so fast that it would give the Jamaican relay team a run for its money. Unfortunately now we're in a situation whereby the leader of the county council has grabbed the baton and decided to run around the track on his own, and of course in doing so has dropped the baton and disqualified all his teammates in the process. But we shouldn't give up on this process, as it will be forced on us, and if this council were to be abolished, it will not best serve our residents, as localism will simply fly out the window and larger tax bills will drop on the doormat. The county council Deloitte proposals are full of holes, just like some of our roads. The all singing, all dancing, we can run an area of 1.3 million people plan doesn't stack up with residents and councillors of Basingstoke and Deane, who have already had a taster of what would be on offer if it were left to county council control. We've already witnessed the threatened closures to some of Hampshire's recycling centres, the closure of libraries, the proposed cuts to the children's centres, and let's not forget the supporting people cuts, to name but a few. Now they will say these are Tory government cuts. Well, I say they're also Tory county council choices, the sort of choices our residents wouldn't want forced on them by a distant county-controlled unitary. We have seen firsthand the damage their choices have made, and it's been down to this council to look after its residents in their hour of need by taking action to help with those cuts to supporting people. Now, I'm proud to say that our Labour group were instrumental in ensuring that this administration picked up the pieces following those poor choices made by the county council. But now it's time this council took the lead by looking to create a unitary that all the people of Basingstoke and Deane can benefit from. Central government has fired the starting gun and dictated this race to devolution. We need to pick up the baton and run our own race now, in pursuit of what could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I believe we have the experience and expertise within our own ranks.
1 minute.
Expertise within our own ranks to succeed, and I'm sure the staff and all members in here are well placed to run a local Basingstoke controlled unitary that can provide the best possible outcomes for the well-being of all our residents.
Thank you. I have Councillor Paul Harvey. Is there anybody else wishes to speak after him now? Right,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Talking on the substantive, we believe, this is really important, that the decisions about the future of our borough are best made by local people. accountable to our community, and so we passionately believe that Basingstoke-and-Deane is more than able to stand up on its own 2 feet as a new unitary authority, working with our partners in health and education and the wider public and private sectors to chart a prosperous and positive, ambitious and aspirational future for our town and borough. That's why we completely reject the proposals put forward by the leader of Hampshire County Council to do away with Basingstoke-and-Deane and every other district and run everything from Winchester. That's the point of their proposals. They want to run everything from Winchester in an all-encompassing mega unitary authority for 1.3 million people, stretching from Andover to Petersfield, Farnborough to New Milton, Gosport to Basingstoke. It's undemocratic, it is completely unrealistic, it's a larger authority than the City of Birmingham, and it will not work in the interests of the people of Basingstoke-and-Deane. Hampshire cannot want the best for Basingstoke-and-Deane. Only we who live here can want the best for Basingstoke-and-Deane. Only we can drive for the best education. Only we can drive for the best health, the best economy and jobs. And that is because of our unique position of being a council with significant assets and land, that we are able to stand up on our own 2 feet. Now, handing those assets over to a unitary-wide Hampshire authority based in Winchester or to any other larger council is not in the interests of Basingstoke-and-Deane. Now, we've talked about council tax, and if you look at the figure of over £200 per household, that doesn't mean better services. It means equalising the rates across Hampshire to begin with. We want to set out a clear vision here. Let's be positive. Working with our residents and our partners in health and education and business on what the future of local government and services could be like in Basingstoke-and-Deane. The time is now to set out the case for Basingstoke-and-Deane. Let's think about this. What do people want? They want a good job, to keep a decent home where they can live their lives, perhaps raise their families, knowing they have access to good health and education services. And that when they need help, it is there for them to help and support them. When they grow old, they expect the community they've given to all their lives to give them back and support them in dignity. We want an entrepreneurial economy that thrives on well-paid jobs, where our workforce is respected and sees investment. We want businesses to know that they can grow in a town and borough that recognises that growth is not just something that happens to it. It is something that we actively want to shape so that we ensure inequality is challenged and everyone can fulfil their aspirations and live enjoying the prosperity we have all created. I look back at the videos and the stories about the growth of Basingstoke in the 50s and 60s, and representing Oakridge, this is important. We see many amazing ways that we have embraced well-designed growth over our time. Well, this devolution debate is our opportunity again to see our borough develop successfully over the next 50 years and beyond. In education, we have wonderful schools doing amazing things. A government inspector recently said that something magical was going on in our schools. Now, we know that education is one of the key areas people look to, and our agenda needs to be focused on our children and their success. I am so proud of the Vine School, recently inspected and awarded good. I want to congratulate the staff and pupils because that is a message of success in our borough about our local schools and what we can do. On health, we know that the ambition of our local hospital and the drive on the health agenda in our GP provision and the accessible local health services that we all want.
You have 1 minute.
We want to see them joined up in social care in a way that tackles the scandal of both county and government cuts to social care. County would do well to remember, we significantly invest in milestones. We significantly invest in the buses. We have picked up the pieces of supporting people where we've seen a 35% cut in floating support for vulnerable people, where we've seen the amount of accommodation for vulnerable people cut. We have already stepped into a significant amount that the County Council does. We have proven ourselves capable and able. So in essence, what we're asking for is Devo Max. We want Devo Max for Basingstoke-and-Deane, working with our surrounding neighbours and authorities so that the local people in Basingstoke-and-Deane can continue to be proud of a council that they can stay in touch with, that isn't remote and beyond them and run from Winchester. That would be a disgrace. As we've said already, the Cabinet report speaks for itself with what county are doing. They've already made their decision. Let's stand up together on this and be proud of what we can achieve in our borough.
Leader, would you like to sum up now, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've heard a lot of criticism this evening of Hampshire County Council, and I'm certainly not going to be their apologist or try to defend them against what I think in many cases was a perfectly justifiable criticism. The fact that there has been such criticism, I think, however, does indicate the need for change. However, rather like a divorcing couple who come together for the sake of the children, we should not forget that we still remain partners in serving our residents, at least for the time being, and will probably do so for quite well into the foreseeable future. So I wouldn't like to give the impression to Hampshire's officers that we don't appreciate the help and support which many of them do give to the people of our borough. But throughout the discussions on devolution, we have always been open with the county on our approach and have sought to involve them in the process. Sadly, that openness has not been reciprocated. To sit through meeting after meeting without mentioning the work on unitarisation that they had already commissioned was at best unhelpful, but actually I think it was rather more deceitful and irresponsible. And there is now a breach of trust which will be hard to bridge, that is of their making, and I feel actually is going to make it virtually impossible for us to engage with them in further joint work on developing the concept of devolution. The HCC proposals are without support in any other council, district, borough or unitary in Hampshire. We cannot allow such a self-interested initiative to set the agenda for local government reorganisation. The recommendation tonight seeks to move the improvement process for local government in our area forward, and to do so in a thorough, informed and imaginative way. I, unlike some members, am not going to double-guess the outcome of that study or seek to confine it in any way with preconceptions. I think we have to retain an open mind so that we can learn the most out of the work that we pay for. But we must also ensure that we have plenty of opportunity to consider it after we receive the report, and to do so dispassionately, and then come to our conclusions of what is the best way forward. Tonight, however, is a vital step in determining the best future for the borough that we serve. It's vital in terms of the whole ambitious growth programme that we've laid out for the borough, both within the council plan and in many other policies. We have to make sure that our local government fits that growth agenda and fits that ambition. And so tonight we put our residents right back into the heart of shaping not just the future for ourselves in Basingstoke and Deane, but of also shaping the wider way forward for Hampshire as a whole, and therefore I move the amended recommendation.
Thank you. I'd now like to put that to the vote. I was waiting. All right. Okay, the voting's now open.
Staying so far.
That was very quickly done, thank you. I'll just get the result. That's 51 for, none against, abstentions 3. So that's well and truly carried. Sorry, well and truly carried. Right, we'll go to item 12, which is the appointment of temporary councillors. Is that noted? Right. Item 13. With the notice of motion, Councillor Gavin...
Point of order, Madam Mayor, if I may. I recognise that this is one of these issues which is not directly associated with the borough, though it's of interest to the borough as a whole. However, we are talking about a future referendum in which each one of us has an individual vote, and therefore I actually feel that this motion is somewhat of an intrusion into my own privacy and my ability to go to the ballot box and just to keep the way I vote purely to myself. And even just sitting here and abstaining is still an intrusion into that privacy. So if I may, Madam Mayor, I'm going to leave the chamber. There may be others who feel the same, but I hope you'll understand the reason why I'm no longer going to participate in this particular debate. Thank you.
Can I say I do understand, sorry, by looking at everybody that there's quite a few that's moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have just a 5-minute comfort break, shall we?
No, just wait for 2 minutes for everyone.
All right. We'll have to wait because I'll never be able to hear anything with all the movement. Right, thank you. Sorry. Right, we'll wait just another minute then. I now call the meeting back to order. And we go on to the motion. Councillor Kevin James, do you want your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's very empty in here now. The reason for this motion is quite simple.
Sorry, excuse me, please. Are you saying you've got a point of order?
No, indicate to us. No,
just indicate.
Oh, you indicate to me. I do apologise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason for this motion was quite a simple one. The EU referendum is a very important thing for the borough and for us as individuals and for the country as a whole, whichever view you particularly want to form. One thing you'll know is that for the residents of this borough, you're very unlikely to meet very many politicians. There's so much conflicting information out there and various stories coming from various angles from people you've never know or meet. Now, survey after survey shows that the elected politician you're most likely to meet is your local borough councillor. And indeed, unsurprisingly, the elected politician you're most likely to trust is also your local councillor. So therefore, it was only right that we have an opportunity for local councillors to stand up and explain to their communities, show a bit of leadership about where they're voting and why they're voting that way. So our residents can have a more informed view of how they may vote. We may influence nobody, but they have that right to know. Unfortunately, of course, as we can see, some members don't have the confidence in their views. They're too frightened to stand up for what they believe in. They're not interested in serving their residents. And because they've got a split leadership who doesn't tell them what to think, and they can't possibly work it out for themselves. But they're going eating the sandwiches now. I will first move on, perhaps, to the importance to Basingstoke and Dean. It's very easy for people to say the EU takes all our money, read the Daily Express, get a warped mind, and not realise that it's very important to this borough. Madam Mayor, Basingstoke College of Technology got European social funding to operate back-to-work programmes to help the long-term jobless become more employable. EU funded. Very important to Basingstoke. This council, officers within it, have applied for funding from the EU. Entredi, helping entrepreneurs. The ESI MEC, innovation to improve economic resilience in terms of a downturn. Eco Advantage, education and training.
Excuse me, sorry, Councillor, could you speak just a little bit slower?
I will try.
I'm sorry, I can't quite keep up.
Stop the clock now.
I do apologise.
Eco Advantage, education and training for business staff who want to tackle climate change. And Leonardo Engineering, the very important thing of encouraging more young people to go into engineering. These are EU-funded projects in our borough. Enterprise M3, when they first started, the largest tranche of money they had was from the European Union. So the European Union is funding much things locally. But I think the other thing, and one of the reasons why I will be supporting Remain, and I'm not scared or afraid to say it, I'm standing in the town centre so people know, is the patriotic case. I am very proud to come from Basingstoke and Dean, from Hampshire, and of course from the European Union, and most importantly, of course, coming from Great Britain. Great Britain has a long history of embracing the world. We went to India, we discovered tea, we made it our own, but we did give them cricket. We gave football to the world, and now they enjoy beating us at it. We've never seen borders, we've seen gateways. That's what makes us Great Britain. We've never seen foreign threats, we've seen foreign opportunities. That makes us Great Britain. We see global challenges, but we seek global solutions. That's what makes us Great Britain. Right now, Tim Peake is in space. A British astronaut, trained with an American in the European Space Training Centre in Spain, with mission control based in Germany, flown on a Russian rocket to the International Space Station, doing vital research and inspiring lots of young scientists in his country. I remember a time...
1 minute.
And funded by the EU. The European Space Fund, 20% of funding comes from the European Union. 50 years ago, the space race was between Russia and America. Now the leaders are the European Union. That's what makes us Great Britain. Brexit will tell us they have an alternative vision. It's not Great Britain, it's Little Britain. And once the Scottish leave, it will be Little England. Isolated, hidden, nervous, scared, hiding under the sofa in case a foreigner comes anywhere near us. That's not the vision I have. So the patriotic people of Basingstoke and Deane who want to remain part of Great Britain need to also vote to remain in the European Union.
Right, Councillor Watts, I know that you want a second, but if you prefer to sit down rather than struggle up, sit down.
Well, Madam Chairman, I'm going to say that we ought to be standing up for this, so I'm going to stand up. Now, this isn't going to be easy for me. I'm supporting a proposition from David Cameron. I'm going to begin by quoting Tony Blair. I quote, "I would like to see the pro-European side to get out there with a bit of passion and vigour and determination and stand up for what we believe. Not just a matter of economic realism, but as a matter of political idealism." I so agree. The dispute between the government and the campaigners for Britain to leave the European Union is like beggars scrabbling for coins dropped in a filthy drain. We should be above that now. I haven't got a talent for aspirational rhetoric, so I'm going to quote from others, past and present. I quote, "The movement for European unity must be a positive force, deriving its strength from our sense of common spiritual values. It is a dynamic expression of democratic faith based upon moral conceptions and inspired by a sense of mission. In the centre of our movement stands the idea of a Charter of Human Rights guarded by freedom and sustained by law. It is said with truth that this involves some sacrifice or merger of national sovereignty." Winston Churchill, May 1948. Oh, that great intellect now occupying the Home Office believes that Churchill was wrong. Heaven help us. Another quote, "The European community belongs to all its members." This one surprised me. "It must reflect the traditions and aspirations of all its members. And let me be quite clear, Britain does not dream of some cosy, isolated existence on the fringes of the European community. Our destiny is in Europe as part of the community." Margaret Thatcher, September 2008. I knew that Mrs. Thatcher's greatest achievement was the Single Europe Act, and I admired her for that. And Michael Gove is intent on tearing it up. I didn't know she was an aspirate Europhile, but he's clearly disloyal to her traditions. I quote, "The challenges to our country and continent face can only be overcome if we work together with all our friends and allies across Europe, so we can create a social Europe that works for all." Jeremy Corbyn, early this month. As a social liberal, I might welcome that, but I feel sure we would disagree on issues of principle and policy fairly quickly. The important thing is that the European Parliament is now a well-established forum for working with like-minded colleagues across the Union. And finally, my final quote, "The reason I will vote Remain is not just about the economy, it's about a statement of what kind of country do I belong to. Are we an outward-looking country, or do we want to stand on the white cliffs of Dover glowering in bad-tempered isolationism across the English Channel?" Tim Farron last Thursday. Now, those of us who want to remain in the European Union have 4 weeks in which to raise the tone of the debate. I'm always being badgered by a man in the pub that says, how much do we give them every week? And my answer actually is a quote from Edward Heath. There is no them, it's just us, the people of Western Europe. And that is why I urge you to pass this motion and to go out and talk about the high reasons for us to want to build this Europe. Now, my great-grandsons are really only interested in Batman at the moment, but I want them to live in an aspirational society across the whole of Europe, and please support that.
Right, thank you. The next speaker I'm calling is Colin Regan, Councillor Colin Regan.
All right, thank you.
Colin, can you turn your voice so you can turn this off?
No, we're working there.
Can I just make sure then that I can hear you, Colin?
Can you hear me? All right, I'll make a start. Thank you, Mayor. For once in my life, I agree with Keith Watts most all your sentiments. I've had a few different disagreements since I got back on the council, but I think it's the best speech you've ever made, actually, so you're quite right. Long may it continue in the spirit of confidence. But I must say, I don't like referendums. Referendums are the plaything of, and plebiscites, the plaything of dictators and despots, actually. Not like I'm saying Cameron is. It's referendums have been the plaything of prime ministers who are in trouble with their party. Harold Wilson in 1975, he called a referendum because of pressure from the left to have a referendum to come out of the common market, as it was. And now David Cameron is in serious trouble after the Civil War and the Tory party for 20 years, and then called a referendum to have peace within the party. Well, that worked, didn't it? But I mean, it must rise above that. I mean, as Keith was saying. I mean, in 1975, I remember walking down to the polling station, a beautiful June day, pushing my young son, only a couple of months old, down there, and I was voting for his future. And I thought, well, after it was only 30 years since the end of the Second World War, which my father served in, and no doubt many relatives of people here served. I mean, Tony Jones, who's not here today, his father was at D-Day. The whole concept of the European Union was to combine industry together. It first started with the French and the Germans to tie in that heavy industry in the 50s together. In other words, they're armaments factories. Why? Because there have been 3 European wars. All right, we only got involved in 2, but that cost enough. We had the Franco-Prussian War of 1871, the First War of 1914, and the Second World War, which grew out of the consequences of the First World War in 1939. And so we was late in, but it has, one of the main things it has done, ever since we went in, and Ted Heath, a person I used to detest, and probably still do, so is Thatcher, but I still detest her. But to tie industries together, it's brought peace and prosperity to Europe. All the thousands, you know about the previous hundreds, the thousands of years have been struggles between us and the French, but mainly in the Industrial Revolution, it was the French and the Germans. So now my son has his own children, my grandchildren. So I should be going down on voting by post because I'll be on a cruise, but in Europe, voting to stay in. As I voted for my 2 sons before, I am now voting for my 2 grandchildren, for peace and prosperity in Europe. And it all filters all the way down through shared sovereignty and an open look into the world. Right, I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Right, next, Councillor Ken Rattigan, and it's your maiden speech since you've come back to us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see around all my colleagues have decided to leave. It's obvious that they had worries about me speaking once again in this chamber. Even more amusing, I think, is that the Remainers have left and the Leavers have remained. All of us in this council have been democratically elected to decide what happens here in Basingstoke-in-Deane. In the words of Abraham Lincoln, this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The same cannot be said for the European Union. There are many people in power there who are political appointments, where debate is closed down and people are merely irritants, where the power of officials is used to quell debate and legitimate opposition, where the freedom of speech that we all enjoy is drowned out by a cacophony of noise from the European Union state apparatus. Never has so much bad law been inflicted on so many by so few. This is not an institution that we can see clear vision for. It hasn't produced properly signed off accounts for more than a decade. How can we trust an organisation that cannot be transparent and will not answer to the questions of the very people it claims to govern? Our sovereignty, our nationhood is at stake as the machine of the European Union draws us even closer to a federal state. Not that the Leave campaign have got it all right by focusing on people's fear of immigration. For we need immigrants. We need people wishing to have a better life here, a better future for their children, while building a stake in our society, where they can work in a free, less regulated employment environment to earn the money to climb the ladder of prosperity, not looking for a handout, but a hand up. It is important, though, that we regulate that number of people who come to this country, to provide them with the correct support to integrate them well into our society. We need the right number of school places, the right capacity in our medical centres and in our hospitals, whilst providing the jobs to help them on that way to an improved life. But for the Remain to campaign, to shout that the next recession is just round the corner if we leave, is doing down our nation. Are we really saying that we are weaker, a lesser country, without the prop of 27 other members of the EU to support us? There will not be financial Armageddon on the 24th of June if we exit. There will be no rioting on the streets, no estate agents going bust on the fall of house prices. There is no doubt, though, there will be tough times in the short term. But are we not a nation that when adversity is at our door, do we not roll up our sleeves, get on with the job, and persevere till the task is completed? Yeah. Are we a nation that has produced the best, the finest, the most respected of products and people? Have we not pushed back the boundaries of knowledge and learning for the world at large? Has the English language not given humanity the greatest form of communication? Have we not provided an understanding of what the law is and how to implement it fairly? The European Union has dragged us back to some sort of mediocrity, a sense of so-so is fine, the biting of a tongue when we think we might offend somebody or something by breaching their human rights or poking fun at them. Once we had the best of everything, now even our speed cameras are just average. Can the UK not be the shining city on the hill? Should we not be the beacon of others to guide the way and lead to a different future? Can we not innovate in adversity? Have we not got the flexibility to solve problems? Can we not be a nation alone in our national identity, but together with others when the world needs us for the better British to come to the fore, whether that be in peace or in conflict? I do not believe, therefore, that we would be exiting anything, but only entering through a new door to a new place, to a new sovereignty, to a new Britain. Therefore, I cannot agree with this motion, and I will vote accordingly.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. About 10 minutes left, so if you would kindly be a bit generous and not take up your 5 minutes, then it gives everybody a chance to speak. And I'm calling on Janet Westbrook for her maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Seeing that we're about to make one of the most important decisions, certainly in my lifetime, I thought it appropriate that I say a few words on the subject. I must first point out that I'm a Remainer. I know that some members will be disappointed to hear this, but I class myself as British and European, and I'm proud to say that. I won't talk tonight about the economic benefits to being in the EU. I'm sure the Prime Minister has had plenty to say on this, albeit sometimes, in my opinion, it's been a little too doom-laden, although probably true. But equally, we've had the Brexiteers on the other side who are full of promises of the land of milk and honey if we go it alone. Their message is the grass will be greener on the other side, only I don't think it will. And they tour the town on their bus, blasting out the dam busters, saying to everyone, you're not patriotic if you want to be in the EU. Well, I think that's rubbish. So why am I a Remainer? Well, one reason comes from my time living in Wales. You can't help but see how EU grants have enabled development and regeneration to a country that desperately needed it after the decimation of its main industry. The same goes for many areas in the rest of the UK. And then I think back to something my father said to me many years ago. Having been in the Navy in the Second World War, like many veterans, he didn't often speak of it. But what he did say has stuck with me. He said that joining together of countries was, in his opinion, something we must ensure continues. He said that he would not want his children to have to see or deal with the things that he had, and that the resolutions made then regarding this union of countries would be crucial in ensuring it never happened again. Now, I'm sure many will say that this referendum is about more than that, and they're probably right, and the EU requires some work, and I don't think anyone believes that it doesn't need reform. But my instincts on remaining were confirmed recently by something a resident said to me. It didn't relate at all to the EU, but to a few residents who had laid on a small party for the neighbours. They'd gone around and asked for people to help. But some of the neighbours had played no part in the preparations, but afterwards were first in the queue to criticise all manner of things, including the food and cakes, believing that they felt they could have done better. The response was, if you want to make changes, then join the group and have your say, otherwise be quiet. Now, I liken this to wanting to change the European Union. We can either moan from the sidelines or join in and have our say in improving it. Perhaps we can all learn the lessons from the cake experience. Thank you.
Right, next, Councillor Anneli Kubit.
Thank you. I am afraid I won't be supporting the motion, unsurprisingly. But back in 1973, the British people voted to join a common market called the EEC. We did not vote to join the Federal United States of Europe. We didn't vote to give up our hard-fought for and much-treasured democracy and sovereignty. You make much reference to the money and the largesse to Wales and to the peoples of Basingstoke, but the truth is that money is our money, which we give to the European Union. It is a fact that we are one of only 2 countries which pay net monies into the EU project. It is a fact that we cede control of £20 billion per annum, of which half comes back, but to projects that the EU want to spend it on. So in Wales and in Basingstoke, those are the projects, but we don't have control over where those go. It is a fact that just over 64% of all our laws emanate from Brussels, and it is a fact that we have not managed to block a single proposal from the Commission passing through the Council. We have objected 72 times and been overruled 72 times. So your story about the cakes is a wonderful story, but the truth is we have absolutely no influence in Europe, and yet we write all the checks. So why do I want to vote to leave? There are three principal areas that I think are so essential to the future of our country. Costs, and because we're running out of time, I'm not going to go into the actual true cost. In the southeast of England, we pay the EU 3.5 billion per annum. That's the southeast chit. I want to spend our money on our priorities. I want to take back control of our laws, and I want to build a fairer, safer immigration system where we have control of our immigration, not have absolutely no control. If we vote to stay in the EU, we'll be stuck with an out-of-control immigration system, and I don't believe that that's what the residents of Basingstoke want, and certainly on the street it's certainly an issue that comes up all the time. The future of an independent Britain is bright. I am not a little Englander, and I don't think many Brexiteers are. We have always been a global, outward-looking, international player. We can forge ahead and trade with old and new friends all over the world. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. We have the 4th largest military budget. We are a member of NATO, the UN, we have a permanent seat, G8 and G20. And if we're not big enough to trade on our own, I don't know who is in the world. I love Europe. I speak fluent French. I also happen to speak Sri Lankan. I have a European business degree. I've travelled all over the world. I've worked all over the world. I'm not a little Englander. The Remainers talk about the risks of leaving, but the risks of remaining are far greater in an unreformed, undemocratic, authoritarian EU, which is hell-bent on ever closer union and which has significant structural flaws and severe financial problems. If the EU was capable of being reformed, I'd love to stay within it, but it's proven time and time again it's not prepared to be reformed, and the contempt with which it held our Prime Minister recently demonstrates that it is unreformable. If we vote to leave, we regain control of our sovereignty and our democracy. We can be in charge of our own destiny. We can be outward-looking and have an exciting future, choosing to deal with whom we want, when we want, and we can be one of one, not one of 28, many of whom have very low comparable GDPs, outputs, with serious worsening economic problems and drastically high youth unemployment and all the social woes that brings with it. I cannot support this motion. I hope the people of Basingstoke and Dean will vote to leave. I'm very upset with the Conservatives for failing to stay, well, most of the Conservatives, who are evidently all Remainers, and I hope the people of Britain vote to leave, and I hope my children and my children's children will be able to celebrate the 24th of June as Independence Day hereinafter.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Paul Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As has been said this evening, in 4 weeks we're going to take part in one of the momentous decisions that we will have to make as a country. That is, whether Harry Kane or Wayne Rooney should lead England's Euro line in 2016. Now, seriously, quite seriously, I think Kane playing off of Vardy up front is a far stronger choice, so I'm voting Kane to remain. Now, when I read the point of this motion, the politics of it wasn't lost on me, but it gave me pause to think about Basingstoke and our relationship with Europe. And I don't mean our town's twinning arrangements, as important as some may believe they are. I'm talking about major firms, international firms, like Sony and Fujitsu and Lilly, who chose Basingstoke as their base of operations in Europe, proud of our successful place trading with Europe, and the thousands of jobs in our town and borough which are reliant on our place in Europe. Now, there are many arguments about the European Union that are being debated vigorously on the national stage, much of which is puerile and very disappointing. I think we can do far better than the national debate, I hope, locally. But make no mistake, the economic facts are clear and they are important. Basingstoke is better because we are a part of Europe. Your job, your prosperity, your family living in Basingstoke are better off because we seized the opportunity Europe presented to our town and borough, and because we had a successful inward investment strategy that attracted the big and small European-focused businesses. Businesses that want to be here creating jobs and local prosperity in Basingstoke and Dean because we are the doorway to the European Union and the market inside the EU. Now, I'm going to be voting to remain in the EU because we all know how important it is for the future of our town and borough that we are a positive and full part of the EU. We've seen investment from the EU directly in our young people. €75,000 given to Shaping Characters project, run by Costello College and the consortium. £1.2 million of money invested in our local rural businesses, and £43 million allocated through the European Structural Investment Fund to our LEP to plug the infrastructure hole in the government and private developers have left us with. At least Europe recognises Basingstoke's infrastructural investment, even if the government doesn't. So yes, it might be our money, but it's coming back to us in a circumrote way. We're culturally better for the wonderful enrichment our multi-faith and multicultural borough offers. We need to celebrate that diversity and be proud of what we can become because of it. I will never give in to the fear, the nationalism and the xenophobia that is being peddled by some who forget that the values that so many people died and fought for. I don't want to get into the fear and scaremongering here. I want to talk positively about the contribution that the European Union and Europe makes to our borough and our residents and what we can take from it to continue to be successful. It does matter. Europe is important. It isn't a small issue for Basingstoke and Dean. I regret as well that people have walked out the chamber this evening. This is about our borough, our place in the country and our place in Europe. And for those businesses who are here because of Europe, I say to them, well, from our group, we welcome you in Basingstoke and Dean. We welcome your aspiration and ambition for our town and our borough.
Thank you. I'm now going to say to sum up, because there's literally 7 seconds left and I don't think anybody could do that. So we need to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will sum up very quickly. First of all, I should deal with the issue of democratic deficit. I don't think anyone's really looked at the European Union Constitution. Unfortunately, I've read it. And it makes it absolutely clear that obviously most policies are driven and new laws are driven by the European Council, which is made up of the democratically elected leader of every nation within the EU. They passport those policies and ideas to the Commission, who are appointed, who decide whether or not it's within the existing treaties and whether it's better for EU to operate as one rather than individual nations acting alone. If they decide individual nations should act alone, it's kicked out. Once they've come up with a policy, it goes to the Council of the European Union, which is made up of the relevant minister from each country for the topic being discussed. So if it's a trading matter, it'll be someone from the DTI who would go along and represent the UK. Appointed by their democratically elected government, they are elected MPs or lords as ministers. It also has to go for the Houses of Parliament, democratically elected by proportional representation, and they can kick policies back as well. So there we go. It's perfectly democratic and more democratic than the House of Lords or some of the other quangos that we have, including the British Potato Board and things like that. In terms of EU laws, we don't give up sovereignty, we pool our sovereignty. There are many laws that we make that are over and above what the EU wants, and certainly in terms of talking about freedom of speech, Section 5 Public Order Act offences have now been amended, but at one point they were a British law over and above the European law that restricted what some people could say. That law's now been repealed in the UK, nothing to do with the European Union. I say to anyone who approaches me and says, it's all these bloody EU laws, I ask them, can you tell me what you wanted to do in the last week that you couldn't do because of an EU law? And every single Brexiteer I speak to goes, that's stupid, and walks off. None of them can come up with a reason. We have to remember we get other benefits from the EU. Of course, all these free trade agreements with the 27 EU nations, plus the other 60 countries that the EU has trade agreements with, are negotiated by a team of EU negotiators, so we don't have to pay on our own. We will have to pick up that cost if we leave the EU. Someone also mentioned accounts. I can confirm to please Councillor Rattigan that the EU accounts have been signed off every year since 2007. There have noted errors, and in fact in 2014, out of 1,200 they inspected, there was 22 errors. The errors didn't result in a loss of money. What happened was some services had been procured without following the procurement procedure. That counted as an error. Some farmer in France mismeasured his land, got a greater subsidy than he should have done. It wasn't fraud. He was written to, he paid it back, but that counts as an error. Money is not going missing. That's in a budget of £142 billion. The NHS has a much bigger budget than that, and I'm sure if we scrutinise the NHS spending, there would be errors in their accounts as well. Are we going to leave the NHS? Absolutely we're not. So there we go. I think a lot of it is nonsense, and in terms of this In terms of the immigration situation, the figures today reveal that 50% of the migrants to this country are from outside the EU. We have control over that, but we choose to let a lot of people in that we want. So therefore, the immigration argument is very poor, and of course the Brexiteers still haven't given us their vision of Europe post-Brexit. If we have a free trade agreement with the European Union, we will still have open borders, we will still have to pay a subsidy into the European Union, we will still have to apply with those laws, but we will have no say in the decisions. So if we exit, we completely exit, and then we are an isolated nation. I ask you to support the motion and look after the people of this borough. Thank you.
All right.
Recorded vote.
You're asking for recorded vote. Okay. Point of order.
It was on Councillor James's comment about sheep. I can confirm I was counting them as he spoke.
That wasn't a point of order, but you've said it now.
Point of order. Typical Brexiteer doesn't listen to the strong argument. Thank you.
On, let's come to order, please. We're now ready to vote. Right, has everybody voted? Right, I'll close the vote. Right, wait for it. It was 22 yes, 7 no, and 2 abstained. Clearly, this is an unusual one. So we have spent some time with officers and legal. But this motion actually is not a matter for the executive. It's a matter for the council. And under the Constitution 14.4b, motions that involve a council function, it can only be carried immediately if there are no votes against. We clearly have votes against. As there have been votes against, it will not be actioned immediately, and the convention of this council is that the mayor can use his or her discretion to declare that the motion has failed. And I decree it has failed only because it has nowhere to actually go to. Thank you. And with that, can I just say that there is no further business. So I'd like to close the meeting and thank you for behaving yourself quite well this evening. And good night. Safe journey home.